Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elliot Kallen, CEO of Prosperity Financial Group, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Meet the Expert with Elliot Kallen. Something different again today. We've been mixing it up a lot to make it more interesting. We're really going to dedicate this show to business owners and friends and family of business owners. So if you know somebody that owns a company, this is a great show for them. If you own a company, it's a great show for you. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. It's very exciting. We've got a partner on from Vesticor, Brian Summe, and he's going to be talking about mergers and acquisitions. Really, this is dedicated to phase 3 of your business. If you're looking to sell your company, rather than turn it over to your children, which we could talk about why that's usually not a very good idea. But if you're looking to sell your company, you're in the third phase. You started from scratch. You've emptied garbage cans. You've clawed your way up. You've gotten to phase 2 where you really have developed a heck of a business. And phase 3 is now what? I'm in my 60s, 70s, late 50s. It's time for me to do something else with my life or dedicate more time to charity, legacy. We'll talk about that too, and things like that. Or I am in my 40s and 50s and I want to be the buyer. So how do I find good companies and maybe good companies in my area? So if you need to reach me, I'm at Elliot, ELLIOT, at prosperityfinancialgroup.com, or the website is prosperityfinancialgroup.com, where you can view 60 plus of these episodes on the website, or give me a call at 925-314-8503. So let's get started. Brian, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Elliot.
Great. And Brian is the partner and chief revenue officer of Vesticor. Brian, tell us, what does a mergers and acquisition person do in regards to business ownership?
So I guess just a brief history. Mergers and acquisitions, we're a merger acquisition advisory firm, investment bank. So we cater to those privately held, founder-driven business owners who are looking for optionality, whether, like you mentioned earlier, Elliot, whether they're going to sell it to their kids, buy out Uncle Buck, do a management buyout, do an ESOP, or just sell their business to somebody that's desirable. That could be family offices, independent sponsors, another strategic similar, or a private equity firm. So we're the ones that come in and help them achieve whatever they're looking for, whatever the solution, whatever the partner, or whatever the buyer would be.
Oh, great. Okay, so let's talk about the business owner now. If we could, a point of view, I own a company. This is the 3rd, 4th, and 5th entities that I've started in my lifetime. Let's use me as an example, even though I'm not selling the company anytime soon. But now I own a financial business or a widget company. It's time. I've hit the age of 60. It's time for me to think about it. My wife is like, hey, you need to slow down a little bit. You're working too many hours. All that stuff. What's going on in my head and what's going on at the next step?
Well, I mean, think about this. A lot of people, the business owner's on an island, the proverbial island. And that's why I work with people like you, Elliot, and wealth advisors, because when I'm done and when the attorney's done and the corporate attorney's, CPA's done, and the M&A attorney's done, and the trust and estate attorney's done, the only two people standing typically are the business owner and the wealth advisor. But the wealth advisor, when it comes to having a professional M&A to get that optionality that you referenced, they're on an island. There's not many people that they know other than what they're doing within their own vertical to grow their business, but it's like a child to them. And the CPA, the attorney, no matter how good they are not giving them options. The wealth advisor doesn't give them options. So we sit down and say, what are you trying to accomplish? If you were the business owner, Elliot, and you had a magic wand and you wanted to transition out of this business, what would that look like? What would the perfect scenario look like? And we walk them through that. We're very Socratic, but we also want to make sure that their desires are cloaked in reality, right? And so there's a process. Whether a large investment bank like a Morgan Stanley does a $10 billion deal, or Vesticor does a $10 million deal, the algorithm's the same, the process is the same, the timeline's the same. Everybody's dotting the same I's and T's. It's just finding a good advocate to the business owner to find the desirable solution. And that requires a lot of asking questions.
So Brian, and we're talking with Brian because 60% of our clients own or have owned companies. So we have that entrepreneurial bent and flair, and it's in our blood. My dad was an entrepreneur. His dad was an entrepreneur. It's a little bit in your blood, entrepreneur. And I would make a terrible McDonald's franchise owner because I can make a better hamburger than a quarter pounder with cheese. I just can't sell billions and billions of them. Right. So, entrepreneurs like to do it their own way. and there's lots of flavors of entrepreneurship because franchise owners are entrepreneurs. They just have a formula that they like to follow versus somebody like myself that likes to prefer to create the roadmap rather than follow the roadmap. And that's different. What's the difference between a business broker and an M&A expert?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So I get that asked all the time. A business broker, for the most part, they serve a purpose. Most of them are micro, small companies, lifestyle businesses that are not going to get a lot of love or attraction by financial buyers, be it strategic or PE firms. But what they do differently is they never really take anything to market in a formal competitive process. They put together a little thesis, and then they list it on companies like bizbuy.com, and they hope somebody buys it with a hope. M&A firms, not just Vesticor, but all M&A firms, we have a very formal competitive process, Elliot, where we're taking the objectives to market in that formal competitive process, looking for desirable, using our proprietary database of buyers, strategics, family offices, independent sponsors, private equity firms. And we look at that in a rifle-like manner to find the best solution or partner that meets all, if not most, of the objectives of the business owner.
So like a business broker, you go out and you find buyers for that
Correct.
business owner.
The business broker does more of a listing. They, in some states, a lot of states, I think even in California, you can't even be a business broker unless you have a real estate license, because there tends to be real estate involved with every operation, right? And they work with SBA loans under 5 million. But I call on business brokers because when it comes to a certain level of business, they seek out M&A firms like Vesticor to help them sell the business because they know it's not going to sell if they just listed it on some bizbuy.com, if you will.
So if I'm the business owner here and I'm doing this first person so everybody could understand it, I now have reached a stage where I want to sell my financial or widget company. I hire you, I've interviewed you, and you're going to be my M&A firm. That's how this works, right?
Correct.
You've explained to me why I shouldn't pass this business along to my children, because my children really want to be the beneficiaries of the money, not necessarily run the company. We both know that by the third generation, the company's kind of done. Not in every case. There have been companies around for 150 years, but for the most part, that's how it works. Right. And we've had this conversation about what next for me, and I want to talk about that because we are in a behavioral finance world as financial advisors with 2 companies pushing $1 billion. We're in that world where what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And M&A people don't have that conversation for the most part because you want to make the transaction. I get it. I want to keep the business owner as a client or make him my client. I get that too. That's a really long-term relationship situation versus a transaction. And you all understand that. And I'm always concerned, as I just spoke to a very good friend who sold a business who's now 80, and he said, well, Monday's the same as Wednesday. It's the same as Saturday. It's all blended in. I don't do anything different. We just go out to lunch or dinner, and that's it. We come home. How do we deal with that psyche that we don't want you to die 2 years after selling your company?
Yeah, so I'll kind of take a couple things with that. I designed a very unique business and service model, and other M&A firms are just as capable of what we do, just like the 10 dentists in your local area, Elliot, pull out wisdom teeth the exact same way, right? You're looking for somebody that you can trust and have advocacy. And the reason I work a lot with intermediaries, especially with wealth advisors, professionals like you, is because you are the one, more than the attorney, more than the accountant, that is there before the sale and prior to the sale, and then post the sale, because you are involving with everything. We pride ourselves, and we say this jokingly, but we create tax problems, and it's Elliot and the accountants to figure out the tax problems, right? So I designed a very unique service model where we are going to provide resources, time, energy, bandwidth to these business owners, even when they're not ready to exit. And sometimes they're not. But unfortunately, I don't know if you know this, $1.5 trillion was done in US businesses bought and sold last year. $1.5 trillion. And that was an off year. To be transparent, that was both the operation and the real estate, which is about 20% of that. Sadly, unexpectedly, and this is why you've done so well with preparing business owners, 40% of the time, the business is triggered to sell unexpectedly due to death, disability, divorce, and then there's a couple other ones called distress. The company's really doing well, but it's not making money and they have to sell it, or there's disagreement amongst owners. And you've had that as an entrepreneur, you understand that. So there's always dig a well before you thirst. So I found that if I provide resources through intermediaries like you, the CPA, the attorney, before they sell or when they're not even ready to sell, it helps them to prepare when they are ready to sell. And I think that's paid off for us in droves because of that model.
Well, you bring up a really good point there, Brian, and that is build as a business owner or really a high net worth professional, you want to build a team around you. I need an M&A company that's going to help me sell that I trust. And that keyword is trust, because as a financial advisory firm, we are trying to exude trust 24 hours a day, because that's the difference between firms, between people. So I need an M&A firm. I need a really good attorney that gets it, correct? I need a CPA, not a tax preparer. I need a CPA that gets it, that deals with these situations, can help me with the taxes. And I also want to make sure that I'm not so consumed with the taxes, because I've had this happen, that I forget about the opportunity in front of me to make a lot of money and decide the taxes are number one. Am I saying that properly, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, think of it this way. The business owner has many people, especially the three major intermediaries, which is the wealth advisor, the CPA, and the attorney in whatever capacity. We're kind of like all M&A firms are that proverbial missing professional link. We pick up where everybody leaves off, such as yourself, the attorney and accountant, and we provide where those other professionals can't provide, and that is take the objectives to market in that formal competitive process. So it does require a team, it does require planning, and it's not like somebody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to sell, but we do have to dig a well before we thirst, especially when 40% are triggered by sale through death, disability, divorce, etc.
So I had a scenario that happened, and I want to bring this up to you because it happens too often in business, and I'm sure you've seen it. So a client of mine sold his business for 3 payments of $5 million. That's $15 million he sold it for. A vast majority of that was going to be taxable. So in the first year, he came to me and he said, what should I do? I'm getting $5 million. And I said, well, take $1 million of it and pay your taxes. That leaves you with $4 million of after-tax money. And he said, I hate that idea. I hate that idea. That's $1 million to the IRS. And I said, but you're walking away with $4 million in your pocket and you're gone. You don't have to think about it. No strings attached, nothing. Well, he went to a CPA firm because he didn't like my answer. And the CPA firm convinced him to create a charitable foundation. He had never been that charitable in his life. Save all that money on the $5 million, put it in a charitable donation program, a trust, irrevocable trust now. And he would owe nothing in taxes based on that first installment. And he said, I'll just pay taxes on the second and the third installment. And I said, I think you're doing something, an injustice to yourself, because you're counting your chickens before they're hatched. You don't have the second and third one. 50% of, we know that so many of these, or a large percentage of these, end up back in front of a judge or a mediator because the seller feels like they got shorted, the owner feels like they got shorted, whatever it is. And of course, at the end of, in the second year, about 15 months into this, the company said, we're having some financial problems. We're suspending payments to you indefinitely for the other 2/3. That he's having to take them to court.
Or
In
buy
the
back.
meantime, I'll let you answer. In the meantime, his wife got wind of what he did because she didn't know about all this stuff. And she's filing for divorce saying that he misused their money, among other things.
Wow.
I don't want to say that's the only thing, but he misused their money. You could see how fast that got ugly. And he may never collect now the remaining $10 million. And he will have taken the bulk of the profit from the first third and put it in a irrevocable trust that he doesn't have access to.
Yeah, I think was it Will Rogers or Mark Twain that said, I've never seen a man go broke paying capital gains tax. Yeah. And the concept is, you know, we're all going to get out of this. None of us are getting out of this alive, but we also know we're going to be paying taxes. What a lot of business owners forget, and even everybody tries to jump out of their lane. And again, we try to stay out of that. This is why you are so important, Elliot, and the accountants or the tax attorneys. We create the tax problem. Now, when you sell a business, almost almost not 100%, but almost every time it's an asset sale. There's not much you can do. It's a capital gains. You can do the deferred sales trust. You can do some of those life insurance isolates, but you're just deferring it. And then with the property, you can do a 1031 exchange and try to save taxes there. But really, it's hard to get around when you sell a business for $40 million and it's an asset sale. It's a capital gains, right? You could defer it over a couple of years based on payment by the buyer, but this is all that matters. And what matters is before you have to sell, hopefully you're not one of those 40% that's triggered to sell unexpectedly. It's working with people like you to build out an idea, a plan, but give them options so they can make an informed decision. If they had enough information, they shared it with, in this case, the person you're talking to, with his wife, they probably wouldn't be getting a divorce. I don't know. I can't say that, but it's dig a well before you thirst. And the tax situation is a byproduct of what takes place. But the main thing is saying, our job is to find out what their objectives are, how long they're going to still work. But really our job is to get the most money for them in this transaction, right? We have to build that investment thesis. Who would buy it? Why would they buy it? Can they process it? Can they duplicate it? And that's going to create, the more money we make for them, the bigger the asset sale, the bigger the capital gains. And then what you do with that, whether it's deferred or whether you do a couple things pre-sale, that's up to professionals like you.
Okay, so you brought up a really good point about digging a well. I want to talk about that. Before I do that, let me ask you a question, because I get asked this all the time. C Corp, S Corp, LLC. Which entity is the most advantageous to sell if you're the business owner?
Well, if a lot of time, I'd say the LLC or the S Corp, sometimes the C Corp you have, and again, I'm not going to claim to be a tax person. I probably shouldn't even go in that direction with you, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be an asset sale. If it's a security sale, a stock sale, you can do an election to try to bring it back so you wouldn't have to be double taxed. But at the end of the day, the process is still the same, Elliot. And the tax attorneys, you're not going to convert it to an LLC, to an S Corp. You're going to do the sale, but there's elections, IRS elections that can change that so you're not double taxed. And it basically the outcome is exactly like you and I intended to do as an asset sale.
Hey, we were talking with Brian Summe of Vesticor, who's an M&A expert for businesses that want to be sold, or if you're in the market to buy, they're going to find that too. You mentioned a word, and we'll end with this note because this has been really good, and you can tell people how to reach you, which is really important because if you're a business owner, you need to have a conversation with Brian to understand what he does and the value he brings to the table. That's really important to do, and firms like him. And if you need referrals for Brian, for attorneys, reach out to me. I obviously have been around for 30 years. I have contacts there, and Brian would not be on my show if he wasn't extremely credible and talented at what he does. You mentioned a really good phrase here, Brian, dig a well before you're thirsty, which means how many years out do I need to think about hiring you or having a conversation with you before I actually want to sell my entity?
Well, there's never a timeline for planning. There's all kinds of industry, additives out there that say at least 3 years, right? Because a lot of times nobody knows what to prepare. If you do a quality of earnings, how could we have increased EBITDA in that 2-year period to get a higher price value for our company? So, I would say a good benchmark is at least 2 to 3 years in advance, because what you'll find is a lot of these folks are underinsured. Let's say there's several owners on the equity stack, right? They might have their key man policies that haven't been reviewed and they're underinsured. You and I started a company 10 years ago, Elliot, and it's worth 20 million, and we only have a $500,000 term life insurance on each other, and you die, well, you're dead, right? I'm the one stuck with paying your estate $9.5 million that I don't have if I don't have it from an insurance policy. Or there's also things like not just key man, but buy-sell policies that are outdated. So it takes time. Or let's say, Elliot, you want to move out of California and you want to move to Florida or Texas or Nevada, a non-tax-paying state, income tax-paying state. It takes a year to domicile. So I would give a number 2 to 3 years to go over many, many different variables.
Well, this has been great, Brian. We're talking with a conversation about M&A for business owners. Obviously, Brian is an expert again in that marketplace when it comes to M&A. We're experts in behavioral finance, in managing portfolios, what to do with your assets. We want to talk to you before you get this windfall so we can at least plan better for it. And of course, you need an attorney just to make sure you're doing the right thing in here. But Brian, how do people reach out to find you?
The company is Vesticor, VESTICOR.com. And they can reach me on an email. Mine's bsumme, BSUMME, @vesticor.com.
Super. All right. So again, business owners, something to think about. If you're in your 40s, it's something to prepare doing. If you're in your 60s, it's something to think about the next phase of your life. If you're like me and you're trying to create a legacy for your family that includes charity and giving, boy, that takes some good planning to do. If you're just somebody that wants to hand down the cash to your kids or to your spouse, that's another thing, another way of planning, or just do the right thing in the marketplace. But reach out to us at Elliot, ELLIOT, at prosperityfinancialgroup.com, and we'll hook you up with Brian, and we'll hook you up with an attorney as well. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, everybody.